My sister is claiming our grandparents' house was promised to her, but I've been living in it and maintaining it for years, and then I never thought I'd still be living in Grandma Evelyn and Grandpa Henry's house at 32. It wasn't part of the plan. After they passed away, Grandma first and Grandpa 2 years later, the house sat empty for a while. No one in the family really wanted to deal with it. My parents were busy with their own lives, and Chloe, my younger sister, had already moved out of state by then, chasing her career and settling down with Nathan. So, I stepped in. The house wasn't in great shape when I moved in. The roof had a leak that turned the upstairs guest room into a swamp every time it rained, and the plumbing made noises like a dying animal. But this house was home. Some of my best childhood memories were here. Easter egg hunts in the backyard, Grandma's apple pie cooling on the kitchen counter, and Grandpa's gruff but warm laughter echoing through the living room. I couldn't bear to see it fall apart. For the past 5 years, I've poured my heart, soul, and savings into fixing this place up. I replaced the roof, redid the kitchen, and even planted a new garden in the backyard where Grandma's roses used to bloom. I wasn't just maintaining the house, I was preserving our family's history. My parents seemed fine with it, grateful even. They called me the caretaker of the family home. But that changed 2 weeks ago, when Chloe called me out of the blue. "Hey, Alex," she said, her voice overly cheery. "That's Chloe for you. Always sugarcoating things before dropping a bomb. Nathan and I have been talking, and, well, we're moving back to town." "Wow, really? That's great," I said, genuinely happy for her. "We've always been close, even though we've lived in different states for years. Where are you guys planning to live?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then she said it. "Actually, we were thinking about the house." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean, the house?" "Grandma's house," she said, like it was obvious. "You know, she always told me it was going to be mine someday. Nathan and I figured we'd move in there. It'd be perfect for us, with the yard and everything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Chloe, I've been living here for 5 years. I've put thousands of dollars into fixing this place up." "I know, and we're so grateful for that," she said, her tone syrupy and condescending. "But this was always supposed to be my house. Grandma promised it to me." "Promised?" I asked, my voice rising. "When did she promise you that? Because she sure as hell didn't tell me." "She told me before she passed," Chloe said, and there was a defensive edge in her voice now. "It was during one of our private talks. You wouldn't know about it because you weren't there." I wanted to scream. Grandma Evelyn was the glue that held our family together, but she had a habit of making vague promises that could be interpreted a dozen different ways. And now Chloe was using one of those supposed promises to justify kicking me out of the house I'd been taking care of for years. "Chloe, there's no way Grandma meant for me to just up and leave after everything I've done for this place." "Well, it's not up to you," she snapped. "This is a family matter, and Nathan and I have already started making plans." The conversation ended with me saying I needed time to think, but what I really needed was a drink. Over the next few days, I tried to wrap my head around the situation. I talked to my parents, hoping they'd back me up, but they were frustratingly neutral. "Chloe always did talk about how much she loved that house," my mom said, as if that made her claim legitimate. "And she's starting a family soon, Alex. Don't you think they could use the space more than you?" "I'm not squatting here, Mom," I said, my frustration boiling over. "I've invested everything into this place. It's not just a house to me, it's my home." "Well, maybe you could find somewhere else to live," my dad suggested, his voice full of forced optimism. "It might be a good fresh start for you." Fresh start? I didn't need a fresh start. What I needed was for my family to recognize everything I'd done for them in this house. But instead, they were treating me like a placeholder, someone who was just keeping the seat warm until Chloe decided to come back. A week later, Chloe and Nathan showed up unannounced. I heard their car pull into the driveway and opened the door to find Chloe grinning and holding a box of donuts like this was some casual visit. "Hey, big brother," she said, brushing past me into the house. Nathan followed her, carrying what looked suspiciously like a tape measure. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just checking the place out," Chloe said, wandering into the living room. "Wow, you've really fixed it up." It's so cozy now. I told Nathan it would be perfect for us. Chloe, you can't just show up here and act like this is your house, I said, my patience wearing thin. Relax, Alex, Nathan said, his tone irritatingly calm. We're just getting a feel for the space. A feel for the space? I repeated, my voice rising. This isn't a model home. I live here. Yeah, but not for much longer, Chloe said, flashing me a sweet but insincere smile. Come on, Alex, you knew this was coming. Grandma's wishes should matter, don't you think? At that moment, I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a battle. Chloe wasn't going to back down, and the rest of the family seemed more than happy to let her bulldoze over me. I wasn't going to let that happen. After Chloe and Nathan's little visit, I knew I had to get serious about protecting what was mine. This wasn't just about a house. It was about years of my life, my savings, and everything I'd built. But it wasn't just them I was up against. My parents' frustrating neutrality felt like betrayal in its own way. For the next few days, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every creak of the floorboards and rustle of the trees outside reminded me that I might lose this place. It was overwhelming. That's when I called Marcus, my best friend and the only person who I knew wouldn't sugarcoat things. Dude, they're just walking all over you, Marcus said bluntly when I told him the story. You need to find proof that the house is yours. Papers, deeds, anything. The deed is in my name, I said, pacing my living room. Grandpa transferred it over to me after Grandma passed. But apparently, that doesn't matter because Chloe's clinging to some vague promise from Grandma. Marcus let out a low whistle. If the deed's in your name, then legally, you're golden. But you know how families are. Emotional promises hold just as much weight as legal ones to some people. You're going to have to fight this on more than one front. He was right, of course. Chloe wasn't just fighting with words. She was fighting with memories and emotions. She was throwing around the idea of Grandma's wishes, and everyone else seemed happy to go along with it. If I didn't stand my ground, I'd lose everything. The next time Chloe came over, I was ready. Or at least, I thought I was. She showed up alone this time, looking determined and carrying a folder under her arm. She didn't even wait for me to invite her in before she started talking. Alex, we need to settle this, she said, standing in the doorway. This back and forth isn't good for anyone. Agreed, I said, crossing my arms. So how about you drop this ridiculous idea that you're entitled to the house? Her smile faltered. It's not ridiculous, Alex. Grandma told me, more than once, that this house would be mine. She wanted me to raise my family here. And when exactly did she tell you this? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Because I spent more time with her in those last years than anyone else. Chloe hesitated, and I could tell she was scrambling for an answer. It was the private conversation. You wouldn't know about it because it was just between me and her. Convenient, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. A private conversation that no one else can verify. And you're basing your entire claim on that? She sighed, clearly annoyed. Alex, it's not just about what Grandma said. It's about what's fair. You're a single guy living in a house that's too big for you. Nathan and I are starting a family. Don't you think we need the space more than you? Her words hit a nerve. It wasn't the first time someone in my family had used my single status as a reason to dismiss my needs. But this wasn't about who needed the house more. It was about who had earned it. I'm not giving up the house, Chloe, I said firmly. I've been living here, maintaining it, and paying for everything for 5 years. If you wanted it so badly, maybe you should have stepped up after Grandpa passed instead of running off to another state. Her face flushed with anger. That's not fair. I had a life to build. You've just been hanging around here because you didn't have anything better to do. Her words stung, but I refused to let her see it. Believe whatever you want, but the house is legally mine. If you want it, you're going to have to prove that Grandma actually promised it to you. Chloe's lips tightened into a thin line. She pulled the folder out from under her arm and shoved it toward me. Fine. Then maybe this will convince you. I opened the folder, half expecting some kind of legal document. Instead, it was full of old photos and handwritten notes, letters from Grandma to Chloe. In one of them, Grandma had written, You'll always have a home here, my sweet Chloe. This house is meant for you someday. Asterisk. I felt a knot form in my stomach. The letter wasn't legally binding. It wasn't a will or even a formal agreement, but it was damning nonetheless. I could already picture Chloe showing it to our parents, waving it around like some kind of sacred text. This doesn't change anything, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The deed is still in my name. Chloe scoffed. God, Alex, you're so selfish. Grandma would be heartbroken to see you acting like this. With that, she stormed out, leaving the folder on my coffee table like a ticking time bomb. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept rereading Grandma's letter, trying to make sense of it. On the one hand, it seemed to support Chloe's claim. On the other hand, it wasn't definitive proof of anything. Grandma could have just been trying to comfort Chloe with kind words, not laying out an actual plan for the future. The next morning, I called my parents to get their perspective. My mom answered, and I could tell from her tone that she was already annoyed. Alex, this whole situation is getting out of hand, she said. Chloe called us last night in tears. She said you're being unreasonable. I'm being unreasonable? I said, incredulous. She's the one trying to take the house away from me based on a letter that doesn't even mean anything. Alex, it's not just about the letter, Mom said, her voice softening into that patronizing tone she always used when she thought I was being difficult. Chloe and Nathan are starting a family. Don't you think it's time for you to move on and let someone else enjoy the house? I can't believe this, I said, running a hand through my hair. You're seriously siding with her? We're not taking sides, Mom said quickly, but her words rang hollow. We just think this could be a good opportunity for you to start fresh somewhere else. There it was again. Asterisk start fresh, asterisk as if my entire life up until now was something to be thrown away like old furniture. A few days later, I took Marcus's advice and started digging through old family records. I spent hours in the attic, combing through dusty boxes full of papers, hoping to find something that could strengthen my case. I found receipts for the repairs I'd made to the house, old property tax statements in my name, and even a copy of the deed. But what I didn't find was anything that explicitly refuted Chloe's claim. That's when Marcus came over to help. Man, this is a mess, he said, sifting through a box of faded photographs. Your family's treating this like some kind of moral debate, but the law is on your side. You've got to make that clear to them. Easier said than done, I muttered. They don't care about the law. They care about Chloe's sob story. As we were going through the last box, Marcus pulled out a yellowed envelope with my name scrawled on it in Grandma's handwriting. My heart skipped a beat as I tore it open. Inside was a short, handwritten note that said, Asterisk, Dear Alex, thank you for taking care of the house. It's yours now, your safe haven. Love, Grandma. Asterisk. I stared at the note, feeling a rush of relief. It wasn't a will or a legal document, but it was something. Something that proved Grandma had wanted me to have the house, not Chloe. This changes everything, I said, holding up the note. Marcus grinned. Damn right it does. Now you've got your own invisible promise. The discovery of Grandma Evelyn's letter felt like a turning point. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had something concrete to hold on to. A piece of her voice that validated everything I'd been saying. I stared at her delicate handwriting for what felt like hours, memorizing every curve of the words. Asterisk, it's yours now, your safe haven. Asterisk. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough for Chloe. She had already turned this into a battleground, and Grandma's wishes, no matter how heartfelt, wouldn't stop her from marching forward. The next family dinner was a disaster waiting to happen. Mom had insisted we all get together to talk things through, like adults. I didn't want to go, but Marcus convinced me I couldn't avoid the confrontation forever. If you don't go, it'll just make you look guilty, he said over the phone. You've got to show up, be calm, and remind them that you've got the law and Grandma's words on your side. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one walking into a lion's den. When I arrived at my parents' house, Chloe and Nathan were already there. Chloe was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, looking annoyingly smug, while Nathan leaned against the counter like he owned the place. Mom and Dad were bustling around, trying to set up dinner, but the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Alex, Mom said with a forced smile when I walked in. I'm glad you came. Let's just get this over with, I said, sitting down across from Chloe. She didn't waste any time. So, have you come to your senses yet? She asked, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. I pulled out Grandma's note and slid it across the table toward her. Actually, I found this. Chloe's smug expression faltered as she picked up the note. Her eyes scanned the words, and for a moment, I thought I saw doubt flicker across her face. But then she snorted and tossed the note back at me. This doesn't prove anything, she said. It's not a will. It's just Grandma being sentimental. It proves that Grandma wanted me to have the house. I shot back. She called it my safe haven. That doesn't mean she didn't want me to have it too, Chloe said, her voice rising. She told me, multiple times, that this house was meant for me, and yet the deed is in my name, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That's not just sentiment. That's legal fact. Enough. Dad's voice cut through the argument like a whip. He rarely raised his voice, so when he did, everyone stopped and listened. We're not going to spend this whole dinner arguing. Let's sit down, eat, and talk about this like a family. Reluctantly, we all moved to the dining room table. The air was thick with tension as we picked at our food, avoiding eye contact. Finally, Mom broke the silence. Alex, she said carefully, we all appreciate everything you've done for the house. But Chloe has a point. Grandma's letter isn't legally binding. Don't you think it would be fair to at least consider sharing the house? Sharing? I said, incredulous. How do you share a house, Mom? It's not a timeshare. Well, maybe Chloe and Nathan could live there, she said, avoiding my gaze, and you could find somewhere else to stay. It took everything in me not to explode. So, you're just asking me to hand over the house? After everything I've done for it? For Grandma and Grandpa? It's not just about what you've done, Alex, Mom said, her tone growing sharper. It's about what's best for the family. Chloe, sensing the shift in the conversation, jumped in. Exactly. Nathan and I are starting a family soon. This house was always meant to be a family home. You don't need all that space. Don't you dare talk to me about need. I snapped. I needed this house when Grandma and Grandpa passed, and I was the only one who stepped up to take care of it. Where were you, Chloe? Oh, that's right. You were too busy chasing your perfect life in another state. Her face turned red, and I could see I'd struck a nerve. That's not fair, she said, her voice shaking. I had my own responsibilities. Just because you stayed doesn't mean you're entitled to everything. This isn't about entitlement, I said. It's about reality. Legally, the house is mine. End of story. But Grandma's wishes, Chloe started, but I cut her off. Grandma's wishes are written right here, I said, holding up the note. You don't get to twist them into something they're not. Nathan, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke up. Look, man, I get that you're attached to the place, but this isn't just about you. We're trying to build a life here, and this house would make that possible. Isn't that worth considering? No, I said flatly, because you're not the ones who've been taking care of it. At that point, Dad threw up his hands. All right, that's enough. This isn't getting us anywhere. But Chloe wasn't done. Fine, she said, standing up and glaring at me. If you're going to be this selfish, then I'll take this to court. Let's see how well your little letter holds up there. Her threat hung in the air as she stormed out of the room, Nathan following close behind. I stayed frozen in my seat, my heart pounding. Court? Was she serious? After they left, Mom and Dad tried to talk to me, but I couldn't take it anymore. I walked out without saying a word, drove back to the house, and slammed the door behind me. My safe haven felt like a battleground now, and I didn't know if I had the strength to keep fighting. Later that night, I called Jennifer, a family lawyer Marcus had recommended. She listened patiently as I explained the situation, and then she said something that gave me a sliver of hope. Alex, if the deed is in your name, then legally, the house is yours. Chloe doesn't have much of a case unless she can produce a will or some other binding document. What about Grandma's letter to me? I asked. Does that carry any weight? It's not legally binding, but it does help establish intent, Jennifer said. If this goes to court, it could strengthen your position. But honestly, I don't think it will come to that. Chloe doesn't have much to stand on. I hung up the phone feeling a little better, but not by much. Chloe might not have a legal case, but she wasn't fighting with logic. She was fighting with emotions. And in our family, emotions often outweighed reason. The next day, I found a handwritten note taped to my front door. It was from Chloe. "This isn't over," it said in bold letters. Asterisk, "You can't just erase Grandma's promises. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Asterisk. It felt like a declaration of war. The note Chloe left on my door felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just her words, it was the weight behind them. She was serious, and she wasn't going to back down. For a moment, I wondered if I should just let her have the house. Maybe it wasn't worth the constant fighting, the emotional exhaustion. But then I thought about everything I'd poured into this place and all the memories tied to it. This wasn't just a house, it was my life. I decided to double down. If Chloe wanted to play hardball, I'd be ready. I called Jennifer again and asked her to start preparing for a potential court case. She was confident I'd win, but she warned me that it could get messy. "Family disputes over property are some of the ugliest cases out there," she said. "You need to be prepared for things to get personal," as if they hadn't already. The next week was a blur of tension and unease. Chloe didn't come by the house again, but she made her presence felt in other ways. She sent me emails, text messages, even a long Facebook post about how family loyalty seemed to be a thing of the past. Our parents started calling me more frequently, trying to mediate, but their efforts just made things worse. "Alex, we're worried about how this is affecting Chloe," Mom said during one of her calls. "She's really upset, and I don't think she can handle this much longer." "What about me, Mom?" I snapped. "Do you think this is easy for me? She's the one who started all this." "I know, honey," she said, her voice soft. "But maybe there's a way to resolve this without going to court. Could you at least talk to her again?" "I don't see the point," I said, but I agreed anyway. Part of me hoped that if I could just get her to sit down and listen, we could work something out. The meeting didn't go as planned. Chloe agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in town, but she brought Nathan along, which already made things tense. I could tell she was gearing up for a fight, and Nathan's presence only made her feel more emboldened. "All right," I said, after we'd exchanged a few awkward pleasantries. "Let's talk about this like adults." "Finally," Chloe said, leaning back in her chair. "So, here's what I'm thinking. You give me the house, and we'll agree to compensate you for some of the repairs you've made. Fair?" I couldn't help but laugh. "That's not even close to fair, Chloe. I've spent years maintaining that house, not to mention all the money I've put into it. You think you can just waltz in and take it because Grandma made a vague promise to you once?" "It wasn't vague," she said, her voice sharp. "She told me, asterisk, this house is yours someday." Asterisk, how much clearer could she have been? "She told me it was my safe haven." I shot back. "And unlike you, I was actually there to take care of it when it needed work." Nathan raised his hands in mock surrender. Okay, let's not get into another shouting match. We're here to figure this out, right?" "Then figure this out," I said, leaning forward. "What gives you the right to claim the house now, after all these years? Where were you when Grandpa died? Where were you when the roof caved in, or when the plumbing failed? You weren't here, Chloe." "I was." "I didn't have a choice," she yelled, slamming her hand on the table. Her outburst caught me off guard. For a moment, she looked like she might cry, but she quickly composed herself. "I didn't have a choice," she repeated, softer this time. "You don't know the whole story." "Then tell me," I said, my voice calmer now. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just trying to take advantage of the situation." Chloe hesitated, glancing at Nathan. He nodded, as if encouraging her to say whatever was on her mind. Finally, she sighed and looked back at me. "Grandma didn't just promise me the house, Alex," she said. "She promised me a chance to start over. Do you know why I left town after college? Why I barely came home after that?" "Because you had a life to build," I said, repeating the excuse she'd given me a dozen times before. "It wasn't just that," she said, her voice trembling. "It was because of Grandpa." I blinked, caught off guard. "What about Grandpa?" Chloe's hands clenched into fists on the table. "He wasn't the man you thought he was, Alex. He wasn't kind to me. Not when I was a kid, and not after Grandma passed. I left because I couldn't stand to be around him anymore. Her words hit me like a freight train. Grandpa Henry? The man who used to carve wooden toys for us and tell us bedtime stories? It didn't make sense. You're lying, I said, but the uncertainty in my voice betrayed me. I wish I were, she said, tears pooling in her eyes. But it's the truth. Grandma knew what he was like. That's why she wanted me to have the house. She wanted me to have a place where I could feel safe. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to understand why she felt so entitled to the house. But another part of me couldn't reconcile her story with the grandpa I knew. Nathan put a hand on her shoulder. Chloe's been carrying this for a long time, Alex. She doesn't want to take the house from you. But this was supposed to be her way of healing. Can't you see that? I sat back in my chair, feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under me. If what she was saying was true, then this wasn't just about property. It was about trauma, about family secrets I'd never even suspected. But if it wasn't true, then Chloe was manipulating me in the cruelest way possible. I need time to think, I said, standing up and grabbing my coat. I can't do this right now. Chloe nodded, wiping her eyes. Take all the time you need. But please, Alex, try to understand. That night, I sat in the living room of the house, staring at the note Grandma had left me. Her words, your safe haven, felt heavier now, more complicated. I thought about all the times I'd seen her and Grandpa together, how they'd seemed so perfect, so unshakable. Had I missed something? Had there been cracks in the foundation I was too young or too blind to see? I decided to do some digging. If there was any truth to Chloe's story, there had to be evidence somewhere. I went through old photo albums, letters, and journals, looking for anything that might shed light on the past. That's when I found another letter from Grandma, tucked away in the back of an old cookbook. To whoever finds this, there are things in this family that have been left unsaid for too long. If you're reading this, I hope you'll have the courage to face the truth and do what's right. Family is complicated, but love always wins in the end, It wasn't much, but it confirmed one thing. There were secrets in this family, and they weren't going to stay buried for much longer. The weight of Grandma Evelyn's second letter stayed with me long after I found it. Her cryptic words about facing the truth and doing what's right only added to the storm of emotions swirling in my head. If there were hidden truths in our family, they were like landmines, waiting to detonate at the worst possible moment. Chloe's revelation about Grandpa wasn't something I could ignore, but it also wasn't something I could fully believe, not without proof. I needed clarity, not just for my sake, but for the sake of this house and what it meant to both of us. So, I made a decision. I'd call a family meeting. The following Saturday, we all gathered at the house. My parents, Chloe, Nathan, and even Marcus, for moral support. The air was thick with tension as everyone filed into the living room, their expressions ranging from wary to outright hostile. Thank you all for coming, I began, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I wanted to get us all in the same room because this situation is tearing us apart, and I think we need to address everything, once and for all. Good, Chloe said, crossing her arms. Then you can start by admitting this house was meant for me. I took a deep breath. We'll get to that. But first, there's something else we need to talk about. I turned to her, my voice softening. Chloe, what you said about Grandpa. I need to know the truth. If he hurt you, I want to believe you. But I need to understand. The room went silent. Chloe looked down at her hands, her jaw tight. For a moment, I thought she wasn't going to say anything. Then, she took a shaky breath and began. It wasn't physical, she said quietly. He didn't hit me or anything like that. But he had a way of making me feel small, like I wasn't good enough. After Grandma died, it got worse. He'd criticize everything I did, tell me I was wasting my potential. He said I'd never amount to anything. Her voice broke, and Nathan reached over to hold her hand. It's why I left town, Alex. I couldn't take it anymore. And the worst part was, I couldn't even tell anyone. Everyone loved Grandpa. No one would have believed me. Her words hung heavy in the air. I glanced at my parents, who looked like they'd been punched in the gut. Mom's eyes brimmed with tears, and Dad's face was a mixture of shock and guilt. "Chloe," Mom whispered, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't think you'd care," Chloe said bitterly. "You always thought Alex was the golden child, the responsible one. I was just the screw-up who couldn't do anything right." "That's not true," Dad said, his voice firm but pained. "If we'd known." "But you didn't," Chloe snapped. "And now it's too late." I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. Grandpa, the man I'd idolized, had driven Chloe away. It didn't excuse everything she'd done, but it made me see her in a new light. She wasn't just being selfish. She was trying to reclaim something she felt she'd lost. After Chloe finished, the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. I took another deep breath and stood up, holding Grandma's second letter in my hand. "There's something else you all need to see," I said, handing the letter to Chloe. She read it, her brow furrowing, then passed it to Nathan. My parents read it next, their faces filled with confusion. "What does this mean?" Mom asked. "I think it means Grandma knew there were things in this family that needed to be addressed," I said. "And I think this house was her way of trying to bring us together, not tear us apart." Chloe scoffed. "Well, it's doing a great job of that, isn't it?" "Chloe," I said, my voice firm but calm. "I've spent the past few days trying to figure out what to do, how to honor Grandma's wishes while also protecting everything I've put into this house. And I've made a decision." Everyone leaned in, waiting for me to drop the hammer. I looked directly at Chloe. "You were right about one thing. Grandma did want this house to be a safe haven, not just for me, but for all of us. So, here's what I'm proposing. I'll keep the house, but I'll make sure it's always open to you and to your family. Whenever you need it." Chloe's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I am," I said. "But there's a catch. You need to stop this legal nonsense. No court battles, no more threats. We settle this here and now." Nathan looked like he was about to protest, but Chloe put a hand on his arm to stop him. She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice soft. "Because I don't want this house to be the thing that destroys our family," I said. "And because Grandma was right. Love should win in the end." The tension didn't dissolve overnight, but something shifted after that meeting. Chloe agreed to drop her claim on the house, and we started talking more, really talking, for the first time in years. She opened up about her struggles, and I told her about the pressure I'd felt to take care of the house and carry on Grandma's legacy. Slowly, we began to rebuild our relationship. Our parents, too, seemed to take Grandma's letter to heart. They apologized for not seeing what Chloe had been going through and promised to do better. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As for the house, it remained mine, but it felt different now. It wasn't just my safe haven. It was a symbol of everything our family had been through and everything we still had to work toward. A few months later, Chloe and Nathan came over for a barbecue in the backyard. Marcus joined us, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the house was filled with laughter again. Chloe even brought over some old family photos she'd found, and we spent hours reminiscing about the good times. As the sun set, I stood on the porch, looking out at the garden I'd planted and the lights twinkling in the trees. The house felt alive again, not just because of the repairs I'd made, but because of the people inside it. Grandma had been right all along. Love did win in the end,